In this episode of Cycling Tours, I will explore the cycling network within the western sector of Yishun. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Transit Evolution here again, and today we'll have a look at the cycling network of Yishun, west of Yishun Avenue 2, on a route starting at Khatib MRT station and ending at Yishun MRT station. To make the video flow more coherently though, I'll first showcase this random cycling path along Yishun Walk fronting Home Team NS Khatib, a clubhouse serving the northern region. It opened in April 2021. Because this big development is built post-2016, it requires a walking and cycling plan, and hence these days, many new developments like it are built to front bigger pavements right from the start, making future cycling network expansions a lot easier. But for now, I shall head all the way south. We will begin with the Khatib Bongsu Park Connector today, the stretch between Yishun Avenues 1 and 3. It will diverge from the railway reserve of the North-South MRT line there, to follow Yishun Central and then Sungai Khatib Bongsu, which shall be covered in cycling videos for the northern and southern sectors. This park connector was built in 2007. As with many park connectors built around this time, they are not very good for commuting because for some reason, NParks was quite stingy here when it comes to the path width, compared to many park connectors built before it and ever since. This makes it a difficult path to share, which is why this is not designed as a shared path but a cycling path. Because of the different path typologies used by NParks and the LTA though, you probably wouldn't know this. What makes a cycling path and what makes a shared path? Well, typically, a cycling path is demarcated with solid red paint, and in some instances, two continuous red or yellow lines, and a shared path is demarcated with two dotted red or yellow lines. But on the park connector network, things are very different. Paths with dotted lines can be cycling paths, and paths with continuous lines can be shared paths. The horror! The only thing distinguishing them are the icons painted on them. See only a cycling icon, it's a cycling path. A cycling icon next to a walking icon, then it's a shared path. So the iconography determines the path's intended users, while dotted red lines merely indicate attention zones, where cyclists should slow down and give way to pedestrians. Near Khatib station, the path is now marked a shared path, but it is so narrow that I wind up with some difficulties in passing a wheelchair. This is bad for something that is supposed to be a trunk route that is used by many for both commuter and recreational cycling, so I do hope to see this path widened to make conflicts between pedestrians and cyclists here less of a problem when overtaking. Also, note that because the MRT station was not designed with the park connector in mind, the park connector came later, this resulted in the need to shoehorn the park connector network around the MRT station, away from the road. Khatib MRT station is placed directly adjacent to intersections, so to turn back to the road, I have to briefly travel along a footpath with many obstacles and high pedestrian flow on the south side of Yishun Ring Road. This may seem intuitive for people like me traveling northbound, but for those traveling southbound, it may not be immediately obvious that you are supposed to turn right after the intersection to continue on the park connector. Perhaps this is why a sign saying, "Cyclists please turn right" is placed behind me at the intersection. Another thing I want to note about this park connector is the pavement quality here. You see, this path has been repainted before, with the old markings used by the previous park connector typology removed, without any repaving, leaving deep grooves in the path, since the new markings aren't aligned with them. Why is that a problem? Well, in the current typology, 6-speed regulating strips and the text "slow" are painted on both sides of a conflict point, while in the previous typology, up to 11 strips may be painted. This means that every time I approach and leave an intersection with a perpendicular footpath, I effectively encounter 6 plus 11 whole thing times 2, 34 speed bumps. Often, these intersections can happen within meters of each other, so by the end of my journey between Yishun Ring Road and Yishun Central, I will have ridden over at least 200 speed bumps. This is quite effective in traffic calming cyclists and forcing them to slow down. But it also won't be long before you start to feel giddy riding on these paths. Perhaps that's why so many e-bike and motorized personal mobility device users would rather ride illegally on the smoother footpaths closer to the road. The windy design of the park connector isn't helping either. Now, if you couldn't tell by now, I take staying on track very seriously in my videos because I'm in the business of literally traversing the cycling network. If I take shortcuts, that wouldn't give an accurate picture of where the paths are. This can often mean that I ride on windier routes that no one in their right mind would do, like here where the park connector diverts around a power substation for the MRT tracks above. Do notice, however, that the park connector here is noticeably wider than the stretch which I travelled through earlier, and that's because I'm now travelling on a different Yishun Park connector, which was built later, as part of the Northern Explorer Loop, completed in November 2010. With a bigger width, this is an easier path to use amidst pedestrians, by making it less likely that anyone will be inconvenienced along the way when making overtaking moves. It is marked as a cycling path for some reason though. There are still a few pinch points at this intersection with covered linkways leading to bus stops, which is alright because you are supposed to slow down anyway. The path also becomes suspiciously narrow as it tries to squeeze itself between two pillars supporting the MRT viaduct, but other than that, it is alright. Near Yishun MRT station, the park connector appropriately widens to an immense size, with a decent amount of space provided for bicycle parking, to allow cyclists to negotiate through an ever-busy pedestrian link to the mixed-use public housing precinct of Nee Soon Central Spring. It's good to see the path adapting to the commuter flow, widening as you approach a transport node, rather than to stay stubbornly narrow as in the case of Khatib which we saw earlier. Unfortunately, as I approach Yishun Avenue 5, the park connector abruptly ends again, and I have to travel on a narrow footpath to meet the main road. Such minor detours make a cycling journey less seamless, but I suppose the residents here have gotten used to such discontinuities in the connector of parks. On the north side of Yishun Avenue 5, there is even more bicycle parking. Put together, we have 1,208 bicycle parking lots near Yishun MRT station, not counting those beneath public housing blocks. There are also 502 more lots near Khatib station, so there's a total of 1,700 lots for a population of 200,000. That's enough lots for about 2% of the residents here to store their bikes at the stations, which I suppose would comfortably support 4 to 6% of the residents here to commute by bicycle. For context, the current bicycle commuting modal share in Singapore is about 2%. Given that these lots are well utilized, I personally say that you can sense a significantly more developed active mobility culture here in Yishun, when compared to the neighbouring new towns of Sembawang and Woodlands further north and west. This is partially thanks to the town having one of the most comprehensive cycling networks in Singapore, which goes to show that if you build it, they will come. We'll start to have a look at Yishun's cycling path network in the later half of this video, but for now, I will need to travel a little further north, maybe too far north even, to show you how this park connector continues towards Canberra MRT station. Aside from the bumpy pavement arising from the yanking of paint from the asphalt surfacing, as the path ages, the material used for the path also starts to shift, and you wind up with many hard-to-see bumps on the path, leading to an unwieldy feeling that you are oscillating up and down along the path. This sensation can get pretty strong and make it harder to keep your grip on the handlebars. It forces you to slow down. Ride long enough on this park connector, and you may even start to feel a little giddy. North of Yishun Avenue 7, Yishun starts to have a different character, as the sprawling public housing neighborhoods make way for a small industrial park to my right and a small private housing estate to my left. This wide shared path comes with a shelter, allowing residents of 8 courtyards, Yishun Emirate and Yishun Sapphire to have a weatherproof route to Canberra MRT station, thus encouraging walking and cycling. But I will have to stop short of that station as I approach Sungai Simpang Kiri, which forms the boundary between Yishun and Sembawang New Town. To continue the journey, you can watch the cycling tours video featuring the eastern sector of Sembawang. I shall now start covering the cycling path network, and we'll begin with this split cycling path along Yishun Ring Road. A separated path design is the closest you can currently get in Singapore to a protected bike lane, and I like it when compared to the typical one used with the footpath directly next to a cycling path, because it protects pedestrians from cyclists by providing a grass buffer between them and helps to preserve trees, providing roadside greenery. It works well so long pedestrians and cyclists follow the stay on track signages placed at the gateway to these paths. If they don't though, oh boy, everyone will have a needlessly tough time avoiding each other, so well just stay on track, man. Anyways, we are currently in Neighborhood 1, Chong Pang, the first neighborhood of Yishun, mainly completed between 1982 and 1986. You may notice that the building forms of the Chong Pang Vale and Chong Pang Garden housing precincts to my right seem to have a less rigid form than those in Chong Pang View to my left, which feels denser. This might be due to a review in building spacing standards to enable a 10% increase in housing density in 1982, caused by a shortage of land requiring more efficient use of land for public housing. This unfortunately results in public housing precincts of that era looking like a game of Tetris, as planners aim to tessellate adequate ground-level parking lots amidst housing blocks, and the provision of green space within precincts do suffer as a result. As we continue riding on, let's explore a bit about how the comprehensive cycling path network here came to be. Yishun's network began with a 1.7km link connecting Khatib and Yishun MRT stations through Yishun Ring Road and Street 72, completed in mid-2011. Another 13.8km of paths were built in the second phase under contract RP228F, which was awarded in 2013 and completed in mid-2015, furnished with grey cycling paths, mainly located within or along Yishun Ring Road, inclusive of this path I'm travelling on right now. Up to then, the cycling paths used the older grey design. However, under a renewed push in 2021, the cycling path network was greatly expanded under 2 additional phases. In what I consider the third phase, the same contractor that expanded the cycling network of Taman Jurong was tasked to add another 1km of paths. This was done under contract PL188 awarded in 2017 and completed in 2021. In the fourth and last phase, where construction is currently ongoing, most existing grey cycling paths were repainted to the new red design, and another 9km of paths were added to fill in missing gaps and expand the network eastwards. This is done under contract PL212, awarded in 2019 and was originally supposed to be completed in 2023, but I guess the contractor fell a little behind time. This contract was originally meant for the cycling network of Bukit Panjang. So as of the time this video is being recorded, I'm quite literally seeing the cycling network here be put together in real time. The construction progress of the paths here quite literally affect my video upload schedule. Anyways, thus far it should be pretty apparent that I have quite a seamless journey along Yishun Ring Road. Because the cycling path is closer to the road than the footpath, there are not many conflict points along the way. Coupled with the lack of access roads crossing the path, I have something that winds up being rather continuous, thus greatly increasing my average speed along the pathway. For what is currently possible under current design standards for cycling infrastructure, this is the ideal, though of course, a physically separated path would be better for safety, and that's what we occasionally see along the way. In case you didn't realize, I'm now riding in the heart of Neighborhood 7. Passing Yishun Avenue 3, we see a very unusual situation where the footpath completely disappears, leading only to a cycling path by the side of the road, and pedestrians are supposed to walk along the pathways on the other side of the canal to my left. This path was originally redesignated from a footpath to a cycling path in 2011, and probably wouldn't have been designed like this if it was built from scratch today. Now, the journey by bike from the northern end of Yishun Ring Road to the southern end near Khatib MRT station took 9 minutes, compared to the 11 minutes which Service 812 would take. It goes to show how the bike can win the bus in travel time, when you let it travel on paths with fewer interruptions and delays. Now, in case you couldn't tell, it's slightly drizzling at this hour over here in Yishun, so pardon the raindrops that you may see in the video. I'm currently travelling along the south side of Yishun Avenue 3, where a new cycling path is added to close a missing link to Yishun Ring Road. It doesn't connect further beyond though, so students of Yishun Innova Junior College who want to commute by bike will have to ride on footpaths for the rest of the way to their schools. Now, I travel along Yishun Street 72, which is a dead-end street for motorists. Since it is not a true route for motorists, the street serves as a mere access road for residents in the adjacent precincts, making traffic volumes very low here. However, that is not the case for cyclists and pedestrians though, for an off-road link using the old path design exists beyond the cul-de-sac of the motor carriageway. Of course, it is not in the best shape right now, being the very first cycling path built in Yishun, but the existence of such a path makes for a more connected cycling network in Yishun by providing a shortcut for some bicycle commuters living in the west to the MRT station. This path will connect to the Yishun Park Connector, where people who use bicycles to solve their first and last mile problem can park their bicycle. I shall now make my way to the shared path on the north side of Yishun Avenue 5. Once again, I do find the use of shared paths instead of dedicated ones with a wider total width near MRT stations puzzling, for the vicinity of MRT stations is where the pedestrian volumes are the highest. Shared paths thus result in plenty of conflicts and severely slow the movement of active mobility users down. They then return to a pane-segregated path design as you move further away from the MRT station, even though a shared path design would technically be more suited for such areas, given the lower volumes of pedestrians. This is where I approach an intersection with Yishun Street 11, which will delay me a little. So when compared to the path along Street 72, it is notable that Yishun Avenue 5 provides a slower connection between the MRT station and Yishun Ring Road. That's the thing about cycling. Along lower traffic streets, bikes can move faster, as they are not delayed as much by the need to accommodate a larger volume of cars. Now, up ahead, we will approach Chong Pang City, the first neighborhood center of Yishun New Town, dating back to 1984. It is perhaps one of the busiest ones too, with many of the shopkeepers here originating from the long demolished Chongpang village further to the northwest. However, it will not be seen in this video as there are currently no cycling paths along its frontage. Those will likely be built in tandem with the north-south corridor along Sembawang Road, which will further complete the cycling network of this town. Yishun Street 11 will be the last street with a cycling path covered in this video. The street slopes upwards from both ends and reach an apex in the middle, weaving along one of the more hilly parts of Yishun when compared to the flatter south. Here, you get to see another popular planning idea that is applied in new towns of its time. Many of the taller 12-story housing blocks are placed in a north-south orientation, which is better suited to the tropical climate of this country. Examples include 131 and 132 Yishun Street 11. To create well-defined edges on the streets though, shorter 4-story blocks are often used to front the streetscape, as in the case of Block 135, which promotes a more human scale. If such housing blocks come with shops on the ground floor that fronts the streetscape, as is done by blocks 150, 156, and 160 on the opposite side of this street, you create a mini shopping street, and thus there's a greater sense of street life. It would be great if the cycling path along this street ran along the other side instead, which would provide cyclists direct access to the storefronts. Still, that's what I like about Yishun, or at least this old part of Yishun. Commercial facilities aren't relegated to just the neighborhood center, but are spread out rather evenly throughout the neighborhood as well. It gives residents here a greater reason to walk, instead of always being dependent on the car or buses to get about for basic amenities. Overall, I like what I see in this western portion of Yishun thus far, other than the park connector beneath the MRT tracks, which really should be widened and repaved. But I will reserve my judgment for Yishun in future videos. As we approach the end of this episode of Cycling Tours, do support me using the memberships or super thanks function of YouTube. This is Transit Evolution, signing off.